we saw in 2020 really shaped what our focus was going to be both last year and this year. As you're aware, we did create the Racial Equity in Policing Commission. And that really is something that is a priority for all of us council members. And as we heard last night with the state of the city, the mayor as well. We're dedicated to really looking at how we're policing and what the equity throughout our city is. And how do we increase the equity in all of our services for our residents in Salt Lake City?
Yes, and Amy, can you tell us, how do residents help shape these priorities and weigh in?
I think residents are the key to shaping our priorities. It's from the residents that we hear what needs are. It's the phone calls, the emails, the texts, the Facebook messages that we as council members receive from our constituents, from our residents, that remind us of what those priorities are for. We're elected by our constituents, and it's important that we listen to them and represent the needs that they have.
And thanks to 2020, I think there were some new methods and forms of communication, right? Obviously, we weren't able to do the in-person meetings and things like that. So what is the city council doing to improve public engagement and transparency? Are there things that you learned from 2020 that you see carrying forward into 2021 in terms of public engagement?
Yeah, definitely. There are some, at least through 2020, I always tried to look at, there has to be some silver linings throughout this pandemic. And I think Today's city council meeting. It is sometime in 2021, February 9th, 2021. We are grateful to have you joining us. As you have probably seen and are very well aware, we continue to hold electronic meetings due to the practice of social distancing. For the work session, we welcome members of the public who may be watching our usual video feed. Although it may be a little different, we are having technical issues and internet access issues today. So you may not be able to see our faces, but I am wearing lipstick, and my camera's on, so there's that. Maybe one day you'll see it. But hopefully you can hear us and listen along with our work session. As you may be aware, it is a work session only, and there is no public comment scheduled. However, next Tuesday, February 16th, will be the next opportunity for the public to comment during our 7 p.m. formal meeting. Your feedback, however, is always welcome, and you can reach the City Council anytime by mailing us at P.O. Box 145476, Salt Lake City, Utah 84114. Or by emailing us at council.comments@slcgov.com. Or, of course, you can call our 24-hour phone comment line at 801-535-7654. And, of course, as always, you can reach out individually to each of us or to your own council member. We will now move on to our work session items. Our first work session item 1 is update from the administration. This is in regards to COVID-19 updates, the earthquake in 2020, the September 2020 windstorm, updates on the condition of people experiencing homelessness within our city and how we're working with our communities, police department work, and other projects or updates. It looks like today I am calling on you, Lisa Schaefer, because I see your camera on. Oh, and there is the mayor. Thank you, Mayor, for joining us as always. So I will go ahead and turn it over to either one of you, whoever is going first. Thank you both for joining us.
Mayor, would you like me to start with the wind update? Okay, I'll go ahead and start. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Council. We always appreciate this opportunity to provide updates to the community and to you through this open meeting. Today, I'm just going to give a brief update on the cemetery damage due to the windstorm. I just wanted to say that, as you know, the cemetery has been closed since September 8th due to the hurricane force winds. We had 265 trees lost on those grounds, and all the trees and limbs have been removed at this point, but we still have 225 stumps remaining. The existing stumps have left large holes in the ground, making public access dangerous and a pretty major liability to Salt Lake City. An archaeologist has been on site since December 14th, inventorying these headstones and monuments to identify tree stumps with the monument extraction and inventory damages and displacements. So the archaeologist has identified 70 tree stumps with headstones that are intertangled or within the crater, and 193 that are displaced or on the edge of the crater. 10 headstones were heavily damaged or destroyed by the storm and will need replacement or major repairs. There are currently 109 tree stumps where no headstones were affected. Those stumps will be removed by a contractor beginning today. It's estimated that 6 to 8 tree stumps can be removed every single day. So we're actively working towards that. Later on today in your work session meeting, we're going to ask you to take a straw poll to approve previously allocated windstorm recovery funds. We want to specifically dedicate a portion of those funds to hire a monument company to extract the headstones displaced and tangled in tree stumps. Once that monument company is hired, Salt Lake City will work with the contractor to begin work at their earliest availability. And then work will proceed to repair the graves and restore those back to how they used to be. Obviously, we couldn't begin this work until we had the archaeologist's assessment done. So we're happy to be over that milestone. We anticipate that all of the work to be completed, we want it to be completed prior to Memorial Day. However, there are many unknown variables which could delay our progress. In the event that work is unable to be complete before Memorial Day, the cemetery will open to the public with any remaining open hazards roped off and closed during that holiday weekend. So with that, I'll just pause for a second to see if there are any questions about the cemetery.
Thank you, Lisa. Council members, do you have any questions? I actually have a question, Lisa. Has the team, I'm not sure which of the many teams within our department, within our city are working on this project, but have we been successful at contacting family members of the tombstones or that have been damaged and working with any existing family members whose families are there in the cemetery? And what does that effort look like? Just out of curiosity.
Really, thank you for the question, Madam Chair. It's a very, very arduous process, and a lot of the headstones that were damaged date back to the late 1800s, early 1900s. And so we have a difficult time tracing ownership of those plots all the way back. We have partnered with some partners to try and help with that effort. We do have a log that we maintain in the sexton's office. So when people come in, we ask them to help us identify if they have an ownership stake in the graves. But as you can imagine, ownership records going back that far are probably going to be impossible. So without assistance from partners or from this windstorm recovery money that's been allocated, a lot of those graves will not be restored.
Sorry, one follow-up question with that. When you say they won't be restored, are we even trying to restore them back to what they were before, or they just won't be restored at all? Like even
yeah, so that's the reason.
Ownership.
Sorry, I interrupted you again. I'm one of the people experiencing that internet issue today. So thanks, internet provider. But anyway, yeah, we are. We had to work because it's a historic site. We had to work with an archaeologist to be sensitive to all of the historic elements of the place. And so they will be restored in a historically accurate way. That doesn't mean that they're going to be pristine, right? That means that they're going to be restored in a historically accurate way. That is one of the reasons that we have to have one contractor that does all of the work. We can't accept volunteer work for this effort.
Awesome, thank you. That's interesting, and thanks for your work on that. Council members, any other comments regarding that? Okay, don't see any hands. I'll kick it back to you.
Great. I'm also next on the list to provide an apprenticeship update real quick. To date, we have hired 3 apprentices. We have 1 offer out there made, and we have 10 scheduled interviews, which is really exciting in just a couple of weeks of recruiting for apprentices. So we're already starting to really get on board some dynamic and interesting folks. We currently are advertising for apprentice positions in public utilities. We're advertising for a metal fabricator, a maintenance electrician, a graffiti response team member, irrigation technicians, natural resource technicians, traffic signal technicians, signs and markings technicians, asphalt maintenance, and concrete maintenance technicians. So in addition to those apprentice opportunities, we also have, we're starting to advertise a lot of exciting positions in the city. So including many seasonal and part-time positions. So I think the link to the jobs board has been posted in the chat. Thank you to, I think the mayor did that. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. But please help us get the word out about these amazing opportunities. This is a really great program. And of course, Salt Lake City is an amazing place to work. So thanks for your help in getting the word out.
Thank you, Lisa. Are there any questions on that? Sorry, Mary, didn't mean to interrupt. Any questions on the apprenticeship program? I don't see any hands. I do want to say I had a small group meeting with the mayor and Lisa the other day, and when we were finishing up, Lisa was telling me about some of the apprentices that have been hired, and really awesome, inspiring stories. It's a great program, and I think kind of went in a direction for some of the applicants that maybe we weren't expecting from what Lisa was saying, but really, I think it's such a neat opportunity to get people that maybe haven't had an opportunity to get into the workforce for one reason or another to open up some of those doors. So I will, and I'm making a note for myself. So if any of the staff is listening, I'd love to do an email blast for my district with this information and try to get some more awesome applicants working for our city. And it's a really honestly inspiring program. So thanks for coming up with that and making it happen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It has been surprising, and I just want to say to anybody that's listening to this meeting, the best qualification to work in our apprentice program is a willingness to learn. So come join us. We got a lot of fun stuff to do here. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Lisa. And I think with that, I'll turn it over to you, Mayor.
Thanks, Madam Chair. And I also think it's an amazing program, and kudos to Lisa Schaefer. It was her brainchild, and I think it's going to be a great piece of her tremendous legacy of work already at Salt Lake City. Hopefully we keep growing it. I'm going to give you an update on homelessness. We reported to you last week that our team was in ongoing conversations and cooperation with the Camp Last Hope organizers in a lead up to that February 4th closure. We are really grateful for their partnership, and it helped us ensure that more people had access to the services and plenty of time to collect their belongings that they wanted to take with them prior to the closure. We had some great outcomes that I wanted to share with you in the resource fair, which was 2 days before the closure of the camp. Our VOA youth outreach made contact with 40 individuals. 8 of them qualified for the youth services, given their ages, and the rest were too old for that program. So the Volunteers of America City outreach team made contact with 63 adult individuals. On the road home, their outreach team engaged 16 in housing conversations and admitted 1 person into that program, which focuses on housing people who are living on the streets outside of Salt Lake City. Valley Behavioral Health engaged with 15 individuals, and at least 6 expressed great interest in Valley treatment programs, and they're going to be following up with those individuals now that they have contact information. Their 4th Street Clinic was out there doing COVID testing. They provided rapid COVID tests. 20 were tested, 1 was found positive, and that person was placed into a quarantine facility with the county. There was shelter placement action happening. The VOA City Outreach Team placed 7 people into shelter options. No clients accessed detox during the fair, but since then, 4 clients from that area have gone in and wanted to access detox services. The driver's license division was there, and 29 people were referred to appointments to receive their IDs that were specifically held open by the driver's license division for this resource fair. So the difficulty that people face in obtaining an ID has been identified, as you know, as a huge barrier for them in gaining access to housing. So we're grateful to sort of knit that need and the opportunity together with the driver's license division. Our SLC Justice Court was there doing mobile court hearings. They saw 27 individuals and heard 46 cases, as well as 2 charges from Salt Lake County and 1 from West Valley. The 3rd District Court saw 7 individuals with cases in Salt Lake City and heard 11 cases total. Curtis Priest from the Justice Court said about the resource fair. To put this into perspective, these numbers for each project, meaning each of the CCP resource fairs, are very close to a regular court calendar. These are not only very meaningful for the individual defendants, but very meaningful for the court as well. So it was a very successful resource fair, and good to see, in particular with the detox connections that happened after the fact, sort of that evidence of the persistent compassion, persistent connection of the resource providers. If it doesn't happen in that moment, that door stays open and the connections can happen down the road. And shifting gears to a more somber tragedy that happened last weekend with the death of a woman who was camping in a Salt Lake City resident's yard. That is a tragedy that I know touches all of us who work at the city and our service provider and partners, but the community beyond, because Salt Lakers have huge hearts. And I think it's part of our character as a city to want to help one another and to find ways to provide resources that are missing and fill gaps in the systems that exist. I wanted to thank the council members who've reached out about this incident, and I wanted also to take a minute to walk through some of the facts that surround the lead up to that, to the tragedy this weekend, and hopefully clear up a few things that have been misconstrued. In late January, when we learned about this encampment, we began evaluating it with our partners at the county and the service providers, just as they do, or we do in partnership with any encampment in the city. And that helps us assess when and if an area needs to be cleaned in the future. At the same time, our building services team began receiving complaints about the camp and issued a warning letter to the homeowner with the understanding that the camp was on the homeowner's private property. But after a later meeting with the planning and city attorney's office, building services determined that even though the area of the encampment was fenced in as though it were the homeowner's property, it's actually is a city right of way. So it's a fence that encroaches on the city right of way. And we did not learn that until after the beginning of these conversations with the homeowner. And because it's in the city right of way, the city and the county health department monitored it as we would do with all camps that are in a public right of way to determine whether it was a high risk or a high priority camp for abatement due to public health and safety issues. The camp was not high risk because the owner was working to address the hygiene issues there. It doesn't diminish the individual's death or the inherent danger of just being unsheltered in the winter. But building services had a call with the homeowner to advise him of the information that they discovered about this being public right of way. But there wasn't a citation issue, and therefore there was no 2-week grace period, which is something that we've heard reported. It's inaccurate. I believe that somewhere soon after that, Councilmember Johnston had a conversation with the homeowner. And on Friday of last week, my administration had a meeting with him during which we expressed that the need to transition people into the available resources as soon as he could. So following that incident on Saturday night, we again connected with the homeowner to offer transportation to individuals remaining at his residence to the available shelters. And so far, through our partnerships, we placed 4 of those individuals into shelter. What's additionally unfortunate with this tragedy is that we knew that on the night of February 6th, shelter bed counts were available in every shelter system-wide. So my hope is that anyone sleeping in a tent on our city streets will instead choose a safer path and connect with our homeless services system, and that we will be able to help people prevent future tragedies like this one. The investigation into that woman's cause of death is still ongoing and as at the medical examiners. I don't know if there's any questions, council members. I'll move to tiny homes if not.
Go ahead, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. We've heard a number of comments from the community about the development of tiny homes, and I wanted to give an update on our city's progress on this initiative. And as I've discussed before, I strongly believe that a managed tiny home community can be one important solution for the many people who've been chronically homeless in our city. Last year, I launched an effort with stakeholders with many different backgrounds and organizations that I think will be key to our ability to conceive of and develop and then sustain affordable master plan communities like this tiny home concept. So the city is now in the process of bringing together from that broader conversation 3 small working groups to push forward this vision, which is to launch a pilot program by the beginning of next winter. The work groups that we've broken out into are around finance, land use, and service providers, so upward mobility and community programs. And the groups are in the process right now of getting the meetings scheduled and coming together. So I look forward to updating you and involving the council in this effort as we go forward. And if you have any questions about what those, the finance, land use, and service provider working groups are going to be doing specifically, I'm happy to go into that. And if there aren't any questions, the next step, I'm not sure if you're planning on doing the policing section now or in the next agenda item, Madam Chair, but that's it for my updates.
We can, I mean, it is the next, if that's the end of the update, we'll go to the updates on racial equity and policing. And then if there is any update from either, I thought I saw Chief Brown on here, but I see Chief Doubts, Assistant Chief Doubts tile. So we'll start with Allison. Allison, are you joining us? Yes, on the updates on racial equity and policing. And then we can turn it over to the police department if there's an update from one of them, Mayor.
Madam Chair, thank you. Before I turn it over there, I just got a message that all of the council members will be invited to all 3 of those work groups. So no pressure, but you're invited to listen in or participate in those if you're interested. So watch for those calendar invites coming.
Great. Thank you so much, Madam Mayor.
Thank you.
Allison, we'll turn it over to you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. The next REP Commission work session is tomorrow, February 10th, beginning at 5 p.m. As we've mentioned before, the public can listen in, and public comments are also taken near the beginning of the meeting. So if anyone, rather than trying to repeat a long website or something, I'll just say that you may Google SLC REP Commission and you'll get a route to get into those meetings. There are 2 items of special interest on the agenda tomorrow night. One is a presentation from Richard Brady of Matrix Consulting, who's in charge of the council's police department budget audit. So he'll be doing an introduction to that project. The other item is that the REP Commission's facilitators are working on providing a complete list of questions and responses from the public listening session, which was held on January 28th. That they will be discussing that tomorrow in the meeting. And of course, as staff will forward that information to council members, and it'll also be available on the commission's website. That's all I have.
Thanks, Allison. Chief Brown, any updates from you or Assistant Chief Doubt?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair Fowler, and thank you, Council. It's good to be with you this afternoon. I'd like to give you a quick update on our violent crime task force that we've been talking about. We have, since January 5th, when we stood together, the mayor, myself, the U.S. Attorney John Huber, U.S. Marshal Matt Harris, and the Commissioner Jess Anderson, we have put a lot of work and effort into this project and what we're doing. But why we're doing it is the most important thing. Look, 2020, we saw violent crime rise across our city 21%. But the why is really that equates to 287 victims, more victims that we had. And so the why drives the what. And I want to thank Mayor Mendenhall for her strong leadership, standing with us, bringing us together. for the tenacity to go after these criminals that are exacting violence in our communities, but more importantly, the compassion that we need to show to those that have been victimized and hopefully prevent others from being victimized. This partnership has grown over the last 34 days. The partnership is really under the umbrella of Project Safe Neighborhood, which is, we've been doing this for a long time. Project Safe Neighborhood, identifying individuals and prosecuting them federally, but we've never done it like we have brought this team together now. I mean, we've really focused the beam, so to speak, on these violent, habitual apex criminals in our community to go after them and to give them the appropriate consequences for their actions and the violence that they're committing in our community. To give you a rundown of who this partnership entails, again, it's the U.S. attorneys. There are several from the U.S. Attorney's Office. The U.S. Marshals is involved, the Department of Public Safety, the State SIAC Center, the ATF, Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, DEA, the FBI, Homeland Security, APMP, Sheriff Rivera, and jail personnel. So this is quite, we've really brought a lot of resources and different departments to the table. We have now met 4 times over the last 34 days. And I'd like to give you an update or kind of the scorecard as to what we've been able to accomplish. In those 34 days, 16 defendants have been charged federally. 14 have been for illegal firearm possessions, 6 for drug trafficking, 6 gang affiliation charges, 7 were on parole or probation, and 5 had current or prior domestic violence cases. And let me give you a couple examples of who we're actually going after in our communities. On January 19th, we had an individual that went to the residence of a former, I believe it was a girlfriend, and he pulled out an AK-47 assault rifle. He then proceeded to crank off several rounds right there from the street. He fled the scene. We were able to track him down. He was brought to justice, and he will be charged for the crimes committed. But he is a restricted person. He's been restricted for possession of a firearm. That very same evening, we had another individual, a known gang member, a documented gang member, commit 3 drive-by shootings in our community at 3 different locations. Officers just happened to be in one of the areas, heard the shots, a pursuit was initiated. The car was disabled, but that didn't stop this individual. He fled on foot, but as he was fleeing through the community, he reached into his waistband, pulled out a gun, and threw it. We recovered the gun, and we arrested this individual. Again, a documented gang member. He's a restricted person, and he's on probation or parole. So this is the work that we're doing. What we're trying to do, and we're committed to this, is to be open and transparent. I provided a sample of a dashboard that we're putting together so that anybody, council, you, your constituents, the community can look and see exactly what we've accomplished. I don't know, is it available to be pulled up?
Yes, one moment.
All right. This is just sample data that we filled this in, though, but it should be live next week. There you go. So you can see that what we plan on doing is having the cases by week, and we'll break those down by the year, 1 case, and the weeks will be numbered as we move forward. And then down in the bottom corner, you'll see the drugs, if there were drugs seized, if it was a drug case. On the next square, you'll see what type of drug, the number of doses, and the amount of money, excuse me. The next square will show cases with guns, and then we'd like to track the total guns seized through this partnership and this project. And I think one of the most important parts of this whole project is the transparency. The mayor, myself, U.S. Attorney John Huber, on a quarterly basis, maybe even more often, are going to come back and report of our efforts and perhaps our goals moving forward. So that's kind of an update where we're at. Tomorrow will be our 5th meeting, and we have more cases to review, but I think this is going to have a huge impact in our communities, and specifically targeting those that are going to commit violent crime in our communities. So with that, if you have any questions.
Council members, any questions? Okay, thank you,
All right.
Chief.
Thank
Appreciate
you
it.
for your time.
Had a comment.
Yeah.
I wanted to thank Chief Brown and for this information. I mean, it's nice to see those numbers and to keep us informed. So I appreciate that work. Thank you.
Thank you, council member.
Great, thank you. If there's no one else, then we will move on to, we are a little bit early, but I see Kate Bradshaw's tile. So Kate, if you are available, we're actually on agenda item number 3, which is just our state legislative briefing. We're halfway through, Kate. How you holding up? All right.
Well, thank you. I come to you from the bowels of the state capitol. We've just finished up some committee hearings this afternoon, some with some positive bills in the law enforcement area that I'll share with you. But first, I wanted to start with, if you don't mind, there's some billboard bills moving through the process this year. There are 3 different billboard bills, and City Attorney Katie Lewis has been deeply involved in the negotiating group with the League of Cities and Towns on behalf of the city. All 3 of the bills are in the state Senate. The one that is currently being negotiated and where progress is being made in those negotiations is being run by Senator Scott Sandell. That's SB 61. There is a new draft that I believe Katie is looking at and poring over, and there are additional meetings of the stakeholders involved in that bill. That'll be meeting again later this week. It looks like that bill will likely be back to a committee hearing sometime next week. The 2 other bills, they've actually all been assigned to the same committee. And I would say to a certain extent, Senator Sandell has been, like it or not, made the billboard official guru of the 2021 session. And so the ability for those other bills to be heard in advance, in large part, greatly hinges on the negotiations on SB 61. So just wanted to put that on your radar, that we are heavily engaged in and monitoring those negotiations, and are grateful for Katie's expertise in that area.
Kate, before you move on, sorry, I'm having like cord issues under my desk, but I saw Katie turn her camera on. Just wanted to give you a minute, Katie, if there was anything you wanted to add to what Kate said about any of the billboard bills. I know you have been working pretty hard on those. And if not, that's fine. I just wanted to give you the opportunity if you wanted to.
Thank you, Council Chair. I don't have any specific updates beyond Kate's, but I am available to answer questions if you have any.
Great, thank you. We'll go through the rest of the stuff you have, Kate, and then open it up for questions after that.
Sure, that's great. The next category is law enforcement bills. And as I mentioned in the briefing at the last work session, there's been an effort to move the law enforcement bills, because there are quite a number of them this year, in groups that make sense, so that you're dealing with similar topics in a committee hearing versus bouncing all over the different sections of the law enforcement code. So the team working on law enforcement bills has been kept pretty busy. Chief Brown and Mark Cottrell and Dave Spatafor and Ashley Marabelli on the lobbying side have been working diligently through a significant list of challenging bills to make sure that we can find things that align with the city's values and directives. There were 3 bills that just actually moved out of committee this afternoon, just about 20 minutes ago. that were all things that the city had support positions on. One dealt with some overarching standards for, if a city is going to have citizen review boards, what those boards ought to look like, and providing some guidance to any city that has those civilian review boards. Another on post certifications that we talked about last meeting as well, in terms of the training that an officer would receive on mental health and crisis intervention training. That moved through committee today and will advance to the floor. And then another bill dealing with the data collection when a weapon is drawn. That bill also passed out of committee today and will move on to the House floor. So we're deeply engaged in all of those discussions and trying to make sure that Salt Lake City's point of view and values are inserted into the many law enforcement discussions that are happening up at the state capitol. Unless there's any questions on those law enforcement bills, I'll move to the next topic. This is another one where we've kept the city attorney's office hopping today, answering questions for us and giving us ideas on amendments. The idea of regulatory sandboxes are not something that is necessarily new. These have existed in state code for a while, and if in your head you pictured kids playing in a sandbox, this bill is not about those types of sandboxes. It's about an area where fledgling industries or new concepts or new services could kind of test out their operations free of some regulations until it's determined whether or not those regulations are necessary for that particular industry or service or business. This year, there's a larger push by the Governor's Office of Economic Development to create a more robust regulatory sandbox environment. And today we suggested some amendments to make sure that there's transparency to the counties and to the cities about that process, so that if local officials are charged with doing things like building inspections, that they would know if this was a business that had been granted regulatory relief in a sandbox and weren't therefore flagging the normal types of things that might exist. So we want to make sure that data is passed all the way down to the cities, and also that there's transparency to citizens and residents, that they know that if they choose to use a business or a service, that they might be exempt from the things they might see in a different business or service in terms of life, health, and safety type regulation. So we're still working with the sponsor to see if we can get some of those items included in that bill. And again, are working closely with the City Attorney's Office on those reviews. Another development we've had, this one is kind of outside the legislative process and the 45 days up here, but the team that is charged with assisting the airport in lobbying has done great work the last couple weeks on a potential issue involving flight paths and airport runway noise, and a piece of land that is potentially up for development, but that would be potentially impacted by the noise from the airport's runway expansions. And so we were grateful that we were able to deploy that team to negotiate with the developer, to have good conversations with neighboring cities about this issue, and therefore we didn't need to bring it to a legislative arena because of their good work in moving that issue forward and finding a great resolution there. Those are some of the quick updates of what's happening up here at the state capitol. We are officially tomorrow at noon at the halfway point. Usually at the halfway point we wear ugly sport coats to celebrate the halfway mark, but I suppose this year we'll just find funnier masks to wear. So with that, I would be happy to answer any questions anyone has about the lobby team and different bills that we're tracking on the city's behalf.
Thank you, Kate. And I appreciate the update on those bills. I know that between all of our lobbyists and you at the helm, we're tracking what, as part of the legislative subcommittee, feels like roughly 1,072 bills. So I don't know how you're keeping track of all of them, but you're doing a great job. If any council members have questions about bills that maybe Kate didn't touch on today, Kate and I had talked earlier, and those were kind of the ones that came up, have been coming up a lot in conversation. So wanted to give updates on those, but certainly if there's something of interest that Kate didn't mention, I'm sure she'd be happy to answer any questions today or in the future. So I'll open it up a little bit. Jamesy.
Kate, going back to the airport, you don't have to, I mean, if you could get me that information, I'd love to know what was agreed upon and, you know, to be able to make it so there wasn't any legislation done.
Sure, and I'm sure Katie will chime in if I misspeak in any way from a legal perspective, but there were some navigation easements that were agreed to that would provide the proper notice to anyone that might live on that land if it's developed into residential uses, so that they are aware at the time of purchase of what that means to live in a property that is that close to the airport. And so that would be recorded. It would follow with any subsequent owners of residences, and our neighboring city to the north, North Salt Lake, agreed. The developer agreed. So those will be recorded. And Katie is nodding like I haven't strayed into any practicing without a license legal descriptions.
Great, thank you, Kate. Any other questions from council members? I do want to say that I went up to the Capitol today, and it was great to actually see Kate in person, and so a couple of our other lobbyists. And also, it's incredibly strange because one, I got a parking spot like right outside the front door, and two, there's like nobody around. It's very strange world we live in right now, but all of our lobbyists are doing a really great job for the city's interests. So I just want to say thank you to the work that they're doing. And again, almost halfway, which I appreciate. And I don't even do half the work up there that you guys do. I just get PTSD from it. So with that, if nobody has anything else, Kate, you are free to go wander around the Capitol halls again.
Thank you. Any questions, you're always welcome to ping me, and I will convey to the team that you all think we're doing a great job up here in our weird COVID session.
Thanks, Kate. Great. With that, we will move on to item number 4, which is an amendment to require notice for permits to work in the public way follow-up. I hopefully have Nick Tarbett. There you are, Nick. Nick Tarbett and a number of other people from Can Hand Engineering, and yeah. So I will turn it over to you, Nick.
All right, thank you. Can you hear me? Perfect. I always have to double check with mine. So as you mentioned, this is a follow-up briefing on proposed amendments to the city code requiring permit holders to provide notice to property owners whose properties are adjacent to above ground work that will be performed in the public right of way. We have representatives from CAN staff here, Matt Castle from engineering, and then the attorney's office as well. The intent of this follow-up briefing is to review the public comments that the council heard during the public hearing, in addition to some very specific requests that were received by Verizon Wireless. I think our goal is for the council to let staff know which changes you would support us moving forward with, and then we could include those in the future draft for consideration. So with that, if it's all right, I'll just step through the items that we heard, and then the council can give us the direction as we move forward with those. All right, the first one is kind of a big one. There was quite a few public comments from people who were expressing concern that this work was only pertaining to above ground work. There had been some hope that this would also apply to below ground work, but the ordinance was drafted specifically for above ground work. In talking with CAN staff, there's some concerns or there's some potential costs that would come with doing notifications for below ground work. So Matt, if it's all right, I could let you talk about that for a little bit, and then the council could ask any follow-up questions they have.
Thank you, Nick. There's the reason we put together the information, or put together the idea of requiring verified notice for above ground versus everything we do in the right of way is really two things. There's a resource issue and really trying to refine what we're trying to do to what the goal of what the council was trying to ask for, which was to address the impacts of above ground construction in the right of way. So if we were to try to do verified outreach for the below ground items that would go on, construction going on, it would take quite a few more people in the engineering department to manage the program as large as that. We have a lot of permits. Last year we had 2,700 permits. A large portion of those permits are in front of a home or two, so it would not be that difficult. But we do have things like Google Fiber, which is going up and down every single street, which would mean that we would have to verify every single home that's along those corridors. And I do need to say that with Google Fiber, they are notifying the people they're working in front of, but there's not a verification that is provided to the city to make sure that we know that everyone has actually gotten a notice. So it's really the reason we kind of bifurcated above ground and below ground was, one, a resource issue, and really try to address what council was asking for, which was a means of doing a better job of public outreach for those items that are installed above ground.
Hey, Madam Chair, can I ask a quick question about that?
Yes.
Thank you. Hey, Matt, you just said that Google Fiber is saying they're notifying everybody that they're working in front of the residents. So say they open up the sidewalk to put in a box. They're saying they're notifying the resident, that resident there?
We require them to notify people, and they say they are notifying them. We are not verifying that they're actually getting to every single person along the routes they're working on.
All right, I'll tell you very directly. They came to my neighborhood in the last month, and there's none of that happening.
Okay.
I mean, these are subcontractors. I get it's not Google, it's a sub, but they're not talking to anybody.
I agree, Andrew. D1 is having the same issue.
Across the board.
Yeah, definitely across the board. Chris?
Yeah, they just finished in front of my house a couple months ago. I didn't get any notice. And I don't know why can't we just require the provider to provide the notice if they say that they're already doing it? I know there's a verification issue, but then it could just be like on a complaint-based system. Like if people didn't get notification, they could let the city know, and then we could check it out. I mean, it doesn't seem. The reason why I think this is necessary is because of things like Google Fiber and I think the frustration of residents, which caused me to raise this in the first place, is that they're, you know, 1 minute you have a normal street, and the next minute at 7 a.m. you know, you hear a truck out there, and you go and look outside, and they're drilling into the sidewalk, and your car's stuck in the driveway. All those things. I mean, I can't imagine that. And some of my residents have said that coming from other cities that their cities required there to be some kind of notice. I don't understand why we can't just say part of the cost of you doing business is that you need to leave a flyer in front of everybody's house that you are going to cut up the sidewalk in front of.
And that is one of the alternatives we provided, which was one where the engineering department would do all the notifying, managing the program. The second one was where the contractor would provide the noticing to all the residents. It's the verification piece which gets a little more tricky, is what verification is. It certified mail? And then how do we record that, make sure it's a database that we, when people come to say they weren't noticed, that we can research that database, find out if they were or were not. And then also to be able to define the boundaries of where that notification is, which I think is one of the next questions that was asked. So there's some pieces to it, but yes, that's, first of all, we could do it. If council wants to do it, we can definitely do it. It's just a resource issue for us to manage that program.
Can I add to Matt's that there is a policy now that residents are notified. So that is happening. It's just not, there is the policy, it's just not codified. And a lot of times I think Google might provide notice with like construction, triangle construction barriers or something like at intersections, and not deliver a notice to every house. So, I mean, those are all things to address in this ordinance.
Yes, Darren.
Thanks. Yeah, I am trying to remember when Google Fiber came in front of my house, but I think that I did get something on my door, but it was really vague. It was just saying work will be done from this day to this date, but it wasn't clear. Like, I think the process is confusing because first there's a trench cut and then it stays there for a few days and you don't know if that's the way it's going to be. And then there's a box drilled in your park strip and the landscaping isn't repaired for a few days. And when it is, it's maybe not repaired great. So I think I would advocate that we require some sort of notice, and maybe we just put the burden on the provider to keep track of that notice. And so if there's a complaint filed, then they can provide proof that they have noticed that, whether that be certified mail receipt or whatever. It's their job to track and prove that. And if they can't prove that they provided notice, then I don't know if there's some sort of fee for the staff time and our time for dealing with, you know, all the complaints that we're getting in. But I think that the notice that we require also needs to have enough specificity so that the homeowner knows what to expect. Like, should I not park in my driveway this week? Should I figure out a different way to get to work this week? I think it's unclear, and I've just anecdotally heard from a lot of people that couldn't. I had an employee that couldn't make it to a meeting because she was locked in her driveway. So I think that we definitely, it's a disservice to the city to not require more robust noticing.
I saw that, Andrew, before I call on you, I saw that Cindy turned her camera on, and Cindy only turns her camera on when she has wise information to provide to the rest of us. So I'm going to turn it over to Cindy.
Why, thank you. I just wanted to check, following on to what Councilmember Romano was saying. Is it a policy that requires notification now with underground, or is it an ordinance that requires notification? And I'll tell you the reason I'm asking is that if it is just a policy, it probably needs to be an ordinance. And I think that in the effort to be conscientious, maybe engineering's making it harder than the council intended, that basically you just require the notice, you tell them that's their job, they need to keep whatever documentation they can, and for example, when people deliver to your home now, they take a photograph and they retain that. That's their expense, it's their responsibility, and you know, we're not as a government having them do that. So if it isn't an ordinance already, maybe the council would want to make it an ordinance, and then I would suggest that you're just the council's just looking for a requirement with specificity, and not any sort of government verification, but just holding them accountable.
Thank you, Cindy. I think that's true. And Kimberly, I saw that you sort of were shaking your head. Your video went off, but if you're still there, maybe you can address the policy versus ordinance, because I think what I heard was that it was a policy but not an ordinance. Is that accurate?
It is a policy, an ordinance.
And then with that, just a quick follow-up question. Is there, does the policy go into some of those specifications or specificities and give some sort of timing? Like to your point, Kimberly, with if Google's putting out a triangle, say, and thinking that that's sufficient notice the day of doing something, then that might be something that the council wants to address of saying, you know, you have to give 3 days notice or something like that if we're gonna go down this path of expanding this ordinance to include the policy that you mentioned. And I'll kind of turn that over to either Matt or Kimberly, whoever.
It's actually a relatively loose policy. We require them to provide outreach, but we don't monitor it, and we don't have specificity on exactly elements of the policy that they need to adhere to. So it is not very well defined.
Great. Andrew and then Chris.
Thanks, Madam Chair. So if I understand it, the policy is pretty broad. So a provider could put up a sign literally in their work area. Because I've seen the sign of SCI subcontractor is here. But that is technically notification. Is that what I understand?
That is part of their MOT, their traffic management program, not necessarily part of the outreach. That's a standard they're required when they're working in the road surface. The outreach is notifying people along wherever they're working that they're coming to do the work.
But it's pretty broad though, because I'm trying to, it sounded to me kind of like if you put the sign up, that was technically notifying that street that you were there and doing some work. Does that satisfy what we have currently, or is that not what we're talking about?
It's not defined. It could satisfy it. It's possible, yes.
Okay.
It's defined enough to say yes or no.
So I didn't want to hold somebody accountable for an ordinance or a policy that they're technically following, but it's just sort of broad and there's sort of leeway there. I mean, hold them accountable for violating the spirit of the whole thing, but you know, legally speaking.
So if I might add one more, there's two pieces to this. What we were looking at was a outreach pre-permit, and I think a lot of the underground discussions were about outreach pre-construction. So there are kind of two different pieces to this.
Okay. Well, Madam Chair, I know we're talking about two different pieces, and we're not actually talking about underground work, which is Google is doing right now. I'm sensitive to the volume of work this would entail. I mean, notice in the sense of Google or a Verizon or a large provider who is all over the city, and there are probably hundreds, if not thousands, essentially, of permits. And that's a massive volume of notification and verification. I think my experience has been neighbors will come and ask me what's going on because they don't have a way to do it themselves. I would be interested in looking at an ordinance for the city that would say, you've got to, if it get posted online or a phone number that could go directly to somebody who could talk about it. And the residents could take some responsibility to call and to look it up. I mean, I think that would help a lot. Just the issue is just information, and there's no information going out. So I don't want to put a burden on the city, but if we could get in the ordinance some way to say before or after the permit, how much information do we expect them to have and to post and get notification of how people get that information? That's more where I'm sort of looking at from my seat.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. Chris?
I never envisioned anything like certified mail. I mean, I think it would be, you know, like door hangers, and they could just file, or even just a postcard that they leave, you know, in the door jamb. And if they want to like mail the postcard and be extra safe, then they can just provide a receipt of the, you know, of the mass mailing that they did and the addresses that they sent it to. Or they could just file an affidavit that says, hey, we were doing this street, we went out, we did it on this day. Here's a picture of the guy, you know, he takes a couple pictures showing that he did it. And And then if there are a lot of complaints from residents that they didn't receive any notice, only then do we have any staff that look into it. I mean, we could create a form that they could fill out with the city and turn it in online, just verifying that they did the notice that they were required to do. And then that just goes in, I don't know, a stack of forms that we can look through. Is that like, I don't see why that would require additional staff. Am I missing something?
Well, no, I don't think so. I mean, it's just a matter of managing all that, is identifying, you know, on each permit, which houses need to be notified. And so it just adds a couple more steps to the permitting process and then management of the database, so that it's a useful tool for us. The worst thing to do is collect information, put it someplace, never use it, and then when you need to use it, not be able to work your way through it to be able to find something.
But isn't it up to them to do what, I mean, if an ordinance says I need to notify all adjacent people, and I only notify people on, let's say, one side of the street and not the other, I feel like as a company, like that's a risk I'm taking, and it's probably a risk that I don't want to take, especially if there's a potential for fines. Then I'll just be like, look, I'll just hit both sides of the road, or.
I think in our experience with contractors, we have very good contractors in the city. We have a large number of marginal contractors. I would say that I believe we can have the contractors do it. My expectation was, well, they will not satisfy what we're trying to achieve here.
But then they could risk a fine, and we use the fine money to pay for the time that it takes to verify that they did or didn't do it. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does, and I would love that. But right now we are heavily restricted. We cannot, unless we have a permit on the road, we can't fine. Unless we have a permit issued, we cannot fine contractors for things that they do in the right of way. So if this is a permitting before the permit is issued and they don't do it, and they don't have a permit, that's going to be difficult for us to find them. And we've been working through that system anyway to have a better fining program to help people toe the line. And it's just a difficult endeavor for us.
Can we legally deny the permit if they don't do the notice before?
Yes, we can hold the permit if we make an ordinance where they must provide verification and notification prior to permit, and they don't provide that, then we don't issue the permit.
Chris, let me note that there was an issue raised by Verizon, that they maybe think that it would not be appropriate for them to notice adjacent property owners for potential construction because they don't actually have a permit for the location. Did that make sense?
Yeah.
So if we require notice before they can get their permit, their comment was, I don't know that we should be providing notice before we have approval, but we could provide, they could provide notice before construction. So after permit, before construction. And then the difficulty there is what Matt's alluding to, which is we don't have another touch point between the city and the contractor after the permit's issued until the work's complete. So if you want verification before they start construction, that's where all the costs come in.
Yeah, and I saw that in the letter, but why is that our problem that it's potential construction or not? And why is that? I mean, I understand that, especially with a telecom company like Verizon, I mean, for them to just err on the side of providing notice to where they think they might need it doesn't seem like a huge cost to me, to a company like that.
I don't think Verizon hires subcontractors to do the work. So the mom and pops that they hire, like I said, a lot of them are good, but a lot of them, this isn't high on their list of things that they feel is necessary to do. So I think that's where, as we were trying to boil this down, is what council's ask was, which was a lot of complaints concerned with a permit was issued for a small cell tower in front of a person's home without any notification. I think that was what we were trying to drill down to in this exercise, which was, okay, how do we do that so that at least the residents are noticed before the permit's issued that a small cell may be installed in front of their home. And then the issue that we're talking about here is then that next step, which is getting people notified when the construction is coming along.
I mean, at this point, any notice would be better than what we have. Whether we like, hey, sorry, we can only do notices after the permit's been issued, or we can try to do notices before the permit and then hold the permit. Like, we just can't continue to be like, we just don't require anything, or we require we're just relying on good faith, because that's not working. So any notice that we can require now is better. And I don't think that, to me, it's an arbitrary distinction to say, we only require it for above ground versus below ground work. And so I really feel like that needs to be, we just need to find a way to make that requirement in there.
And Chris, this is a great conversation because we really want to understand what the council expects at the end of this, right? I think we all agree that now codifying notice is important. So it's just trying to make sure we're meeting your needs and your expectations with this conversation.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Darren?
Yeah, and this comment's going to sound like I'm trying to be lazy or something, but I think there's already a lot of work being done because the notice isn't happening, and that's us getting complaints from residents that are frustrated. So there's frustrated residents and work being done. So if it requires an additional person to help verify something, I think we could. I guess my point is the work is already being done. It's just being done because people are frustrated and upset. And so hopefully we can get something that doesn't require too much additional staff work and is robust enough that for the most part, those complaints are tamped down.
Anna, give me 1 second. Sorry, Nick has something to say and it might shed some more information. Go ahead, Nick.
No, I rarely can do that. I was just going to try to summarize what I think I'm hearing. So maybe let Anna go first and then I can do that after.
Sounds great. Thank you, Nick. Go ahead, Anna.
I had a question about how do we do the notices right now for work that the city does? Are we notifying? I mean, are we being successful at notifying people, and that's why we don't hear that many complaints about that? So that's one way to see what system we do in house to see if a private company can mimic. But another way I think we could do this is if private companies feel like they have a timeline where they need to get the job done because that's how they get the revenue. So maybe they can provide a timeline to the city that says, hey, this permit most likely the project time is from this date to this date, and then maybe we can have a website, a page where people can actually go in there and see what streets are going to be affected. But if we require that before we can give them the permit, like basically the companies need to tell us more or less when this is going to happen. So at the very least, I can go online and see, oh, okay, so apparently Google's going to be outside my house next month. I don't know.
So for our projects, internal projects, we actually have a person specific to making sure that we do the outreach that's necessary. We create email lists. We have a website created. On local street projects, we go to door and leave flyers, let them know that the construction started and when it's going to start. But we start that like a year in advance of any of our projects, and we pump as much information. I think our best successful story is on 13th East last summer, 2 summers ago. A request was made that we were pumping out too much information. Could we back off? And we said no, because that's the first time anyone's ever said that. So we have a person for our internal projects that manages all that outreach.
Great. Nick, do you want to jump in?
So what I think what we're hearing is notification is key, and that's what the council wants us to do. This ordinance would require that notification to happen before the permit is obtained. They'd have to show proof, whether it's a picture, timestamp photo that the notification has been delivered. They would then bring that to engineering as a part of their permit application to show, yes, we did this. And that's what we've heard. Some of the franchises don't support, but that's what the council thinks is going to be very helpful in notifying the public. So I think I'm understanding the council supports that. The next question is, do you want this extended to undergrounding projects? I don't know. I'm hearing general support for that idea. And if that's the case, we can go back and work with the attorney's office and can to come up with the draft language for the council to consider on that.
I think you summed it up quite nicely, Nick. Thank you very much. Would council members just give a thumbs up or a thumbs down if that is something that you agree with what Nick just said? Andrew, and then Cindy.
I agree with the Madam Chair. Is there a problem between who pulls the permit and who does the notification, who does the work?
That's all managed by one group. We have a right-of-way permit group, so they all manage all those steps in the process.
I know internally, but for external contractors, because, you know, Google, Verizon, they're not doing their own work. Somebody else is doing it.
That'd be, I think in the I think there would be a separation of that. If there's a requirement for pre-permit outreach, Verizon would end up doing that. Once they get into construction, nearing construction, and have identified the contractor, then the contractor would be responsible for their outreach from that point on. So there may be some disconnect for the utilities with that.
I think I'm in support of what we're doing now about the pre-notification piece. I'm concerned because I'll be honest, I have a dim view of a lot of the subs that I've seen working in the city on utility poles, on cell towers in the right of way. Even when I talk to them, I don't get any information, and the phone number they give you doesn't give you information either. So I think we got some various levels to deal with. I'm not sure this is going to fix all of it. So I support Madam Chair, but I'm concerned. This is one of those holes going down about how much we have to micromanage to get the outcome we want, because there's so many levels and people who are just flouting city ordinance, frankly. So
I think if I understand that concern, Andrew, and I think to Nick Tarbit's point, I think what we're doing right now is just kind of expanding the conversation a little bit and trying to figure out maybe there is a way to address some of those issues. I also want to expand a little bit on something Cindy said, and to maybe Matt's concern is the people power something like this might take, and not having the resources. And I think putting the onus back on the business itself might be a way to balance that out. But I think what we're mostly doing today is hearing everybody's concerns, and then kind of having our staff and engineering and and everyone go back to the table and say, okay, are there other things we can do to address some of these concerns that we've heard today? And Cindy did pop in for a minute. I don't know if she had something.
Just a quick, do you want to have the this first part passed so that you can get it on the books, and then come back around to the second part, say, you know, give us some time frame, 2 months or whatever, so that you get one part of it on the books? Or would you rather have it all comprehensive at one time? I'm just afraid at how long it might take to get the rest of this done. I think it'll be relatively simple, but everybody's, you know, busy, so.
That's a great question, Cindy. Council members?
And I think that is the difference there, Cindy, the undergrounding versus above ground work?
Yeah. Yeah, just that maybe whatever is before the council right now, if it's satisfactory, get that adopted, and know as of today, and really as of the past couple of weeks, the council has been asking for and would like to see very soon an ordinance that is simple, that puts the onus on the providers of service and focuses on the outcome. The outcome that you want is for people to be notified. I think.
We need a straw poll. Is that what we need to do to move that forward?
Yeah.
So I propose a straw poll that we move this portion forward with identifying the portion that Cindy just mentioned and coming back to us as a council.
Does everyone understand James's straw poll? Dan?
Just one question. This is pre-permit, because I know there was that discussion on the sheet and I couldn't remember how it was written, but we're talking pre-permit, not post-permit.
Correct. This is pre-permit. Yes.
Okay, I'm good.
Any other discussion on the straw poll? Chris?
I just don't, if we go forward with what we have now, I'm happy with that, but I don't want that to be a reason to delay making these other changes. So as long as we can make sure that we are keeping that in the forefront, I don't want to get lost and then realize we never came back to the below ground projects.
I think that we could put a timeline of some sort, something reasonable. But so the straw poll is to get on a future council agenda or action on the ordinance as it's been presented to us at this time.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
On the straw poll, can you add that this timeline that Chris was saying, that and we will visit the second portion by April?
I don't know that we need a straw poll on that. I think we can just make sure that we talk to engineering and ask how long they think it would take to work with the staff and work on some of this language, and then make sure that it gets back on a future agenda item.
Okay.
And I think that's no me put on future agenda item when Matt has the language.
Okay. Great.
So the straw poll then again is putting the ordinance as is on a future agenda item for council action. All those in favor, put your thumbs in the air. Okay, that passes unanimously. Now, as to this second part, Matt and Kimberly and your staff, and Blake, I skipped over you and I apologize. I know that you raised your hand at some point. Was there something you wanted to add before I move on?
That is just fine, Chair Fowler. I was just going to pop in before that motion to just kind of recognize that, just hearing and reflecting back, I feel the desire for an ordinance that spells out best practices, makes that required by ordinance. The, engineering, community and neighborhoods, our administrative role is working with Kimberly et al. In delivering that product with the providers maintaining records. So I just was hoping to kind of take what I'm hearing, synthesize that, regroup, and then come back again with that in mind. So,
Perfect. Thanks, Blake.
mhm.
And so then I think going back to Matt and Kimberly and Blake, of course, and your staff, what would be a reasonable time frame to revisit the undergrounding portion, to look at the policy that we have in place, maybe add some of the things that you've heard today as far as there actual being a notice timeline and or specificities on what that notice might look like, to come back to another work session to talk about that.
Is Kimberly?
Be realistic. I don't want you to say, we're going to have it to you tomorrow, because we all have a lot on our plate.
And I know that we rely heavily on Kimberly. She's the one that drafted the ordinance, and I'm hoping that she's going to be able to chip in right now with maybe an idea of how long it'll take.
So, Chair Fowler, I recognize this is an important issue to the council, and so I'll prioritize it, with me or my office. My question would be, what you might want to see for undergrounding that's different than what we have proposed for above grounding. So the ordinance as written says it's a pre-permit notification, adjacent owners, which is meant to be sort of, touching in every direction. That we'll work with the provider on what kind of evidence we'll accept. And we have some ideas on that. And if you probably didn't have time to look at it, but if you receive Verizon's comments, they have let us know what has happened, what they do in other states, and a few different ideas of how we could get evidence and document that. So I guess I would want to know what else you want for an undergrounding notice, or how they might be different.
Maybe that is exactly what we want. We just have to add the words underground, and then we can revisit this sooner rather than later.
Mm-hmm.
So we could add undergrounding, and we could maybe we talk about the detail that would go into the notice, and we'll make sure that that meets the council's discussion today.
So maybe,
we'll
yeah,
have to revisit it and match it against this conversation. But I don't think that's something that will take us a lot of time.
Okay. Darren?
Sorry, I know we've been talking about this forever. If other council members think it's important, then that's fine. But personally, I don't care whether the notice happens before or after the permit is issued, just before or after the work is done. And if the notice happening between the time the permit is issued and before the work starts means that we can put the onus on the burden of proof on the contractor, then let's do that instead of requiring the city to verify it before we actually issue the permit. So I don't care when the notice happens, as long as it's before that work starts and that it's reasonably specific so that the resident knows what to expect.
So hold on one sec. So real quick, the straw poll we just took is saying that the ordinance would require notification before the permit.
For above ground work, which
And
makes
so
more
what we're
sense
talking about right now is including into the ordinance the underground work, just so that we can actually address both of the concerns without rewriting something. And if we don't care if the notice comes before or after the permit with the undergrounding, then it sounds like Kimberly could go back, maybe tweak a couple of the things based on the discussions we've had today, add the words "and underground work," or however it's actually like technical. There's probably some other term for it. And then we can address the whole ordinance as a package that would include permitting, notification before permitting for both underground and above ground, with sort of some of these specificities that we've talked about today. Did I sum that up for what other people are hearing, including Kimberly?
It seems to me like the reason why people wanted the notification for the cell towers before the permit is so they could try to fight having a permit in front of their house, but it sounds like they can't do that anyway. Like the laws don't really allow them to fight it anyway, so functionally, I don't think it makes a difference.
I think sorry, Madam Chair, but Darren, there's a huge difference because after the permit's issued, there's no verification what they do. I mean, I can't say this strongly enough. I have no trust in them. I'm sorry. They don't even follow their own plans sometimes, Darren. Unless somebody pulls it out to them. And even then, the fines we can levy are so minimal, there's no reason for them to be proactive about this. So I don't want to be sort of the really negative guy, but my experience in watching this, not just on Emory Street, but other places, and the anecdotal stuff over and over again is once the permit's in hand, they don't care. They'll take a minimal they'll take the chance of getting fined if they can speed through stuff and get it done.
And if I can help.
I'm going to go to, time out. I'm going to go to Kimberly first, and then I'll come to you, Matt.
Okay. Sorry.
That's okay.
I appreciate that sentiment, Councilmember Johnston, and I know we've had issues in your district. I will say that if we require the notice pre-permit, that the contractor might not have as specific of information as they would have post permit. So they can say what they are applying for, but they might not have their construction timing exactly. Whereas if you required notification 72 hours before construction, they would get very specific notice, but the city doesn't have a way to verify that the notice has been given before construction. So we have to trade off a couple of things, I think, if we're not doing a notification process.
Okay, Matt?
The best leverage we have is the issuance of the permit to get a contractor to do what we'd like him to do, they like them to do. Issuing the permit is that without having a robust fine program, that issuance of the permit is the strength that we have.
So,
who's next? Cindy?
Is the council also requesting that they address the fine issue so that it has teeth?
I think that that's an excellent idea, but to your point earlier, that may be a longer conversation, and we're on the verge of potentially having an ordinance that could address some of these concerns, albeit maybe not in the entire robust way that we would want them to, but it's a starting point, recognizing that ordinances are sort of like onerous to change later. But it does seem to me anyway that the fine structure might be a longer conversation than us getting something in place now that could address at least part of these concerns.
Right. I just wondered if we should move in that direction, say by budget season, when you do adopt a new fine schedule, if you want these ordinances to be successful, that would just, we can keep it in the back of our minds and see if, see what kind of information is available and then come back to you, but make that, don't hold anything up because of that. Is that's entirely separate? Is that what I'm hearing? Okay, got it. Thanks.
Matt?
That is our plate of putting together I'll call it ACE program, a fine program. It is one like that is heavily restricted by the state code. So it's, I think it's needed, but it's not a powerful tool. Notice, you have to give them notice first. Then it's like $25 a day for large projects. That's barely impactful to the contractors, but I do think it's important that we have something in place to be able to use. So it's something that I've wanted. We just have to work through the legalities of it and codify it.
Okay. So I think this was a great discussion and cleared everything up perfectly. So Kimberly has all of the marching orders and understands every one of the council's concerns in all of this. So I think, Nick, I'm going to get to you. I know we could probably keep talking about this forever, but where we had been ahead of schedule, we're now behind schedule. So I think that we can come back to this. And I think that we're still, and if I see like real adamant head shaking of no's, I think that what I'm hearing is we still would want to look at including the underground language into this ordinance. Nick Turbot, you have the floor.
So that, I feel like things changed since the straw poll, where you would like us to consider the undergrounding now and come back with the permit or the notification pre-permit with specifics as much as possible. And we will do that as quickly as human possible, given the circumstances of everything going on.
That sounds great, Nick.
Okay, so we'll come back in the coming weeks with that, with the updates for the council.
Perfect. And as soon as we have that, we will put it on an agenda and we'll probably have a discussion about it again before taking action. I think we need to make sure everybody's on the same page before taking any final action.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, everyone. All right, let's move on to agenda item number 5, which is our library budget amendment. And we have Russell from council staff, Jace Bunting, the library finance manager, and Peter Bromberg, the library executive director.
Yes, Councilmember Fowler. I'm going to be brief because this is a fairly straightforward budget amendment. The library board approved the proposed budget amendment essentially to fund a variety of things, and it includes acknowledgement of a grant to help set up an equitable internet service, as it were. The other major thing that I think is the money to finish the work on Sprague Library. And with that, I'll leave it to let me rephrase that. Besides Peter Bromberg and Jace, there are 2 other people from the staff who are here to answer questions if you'd like to hear them. I'll leave it there then.
Great, thank you, Russell. Peter, I'll go ahead and turn the time over to you. It's good to see you.
Good to see you too. Thanks so much for making some time on the agenda here. We have, as Russell said, a number of straightforward requests, 3 requests in our general fund and 2 in our capital fund. I'll just run through them, and if we have any questions. The first one is a request for $170,895 for our continuation of our master facilities planning process, and then we want to pull that out of fund balance and just carry that forward into our FY21 budget. It was budgeted last year. We were unable to complete the plan by the end of the fiscal year. The plan is well underway, and carrying that previously budgeted figure forward will just allow us to complete that plan. Our $30,000 for earthquake repair, we'd also like to pull out of our fund balance. The library sustained, luckily, only minimal damage during the March earthquake. If you can believe, it's almost a year ago, right? And we were actually able to do many of the repairs ourselves, but we did need to hire some outside contractors to replace some broken glass and windows and partitions throughout the main library. So $30,000 would cover that for us. And the last in our general fund is $420,000 for an Institute of Museum and Library Services grant. Again, that money's coming to us from the federal government. We just want to add that to our budget. It's not pulling anything out of our fund balance. And that's from the Institute of Museum and Library Services. And it's really to develop a model for increasing digital access to underserved populations in our community. We're calling that our Digital Navigators program, because we actually have a number of grant-funded positions who are focusing on providing one-on-one outreach and assistance, particularly focused on Salt Lake City's West Side neighborhoods, Rose Park, Poplar Grove, and Glendale, and trying to holistically address this digital inclusion process so that we're working with people to get them connected to free internet, to also provide them with devices, whether that's hotspots or laptops or Chromebooks, but also providing one-on-one coaching and training and offering ongoing personal support and working individually with patrons to help them accomplish their goals. So whether that's education or workforce development, job hunting, accessing government programs, etc. So that's that request. I'll also just mention that we do have a number of community partners in that grant, including University Neighborhood Partners, Swazo Business Center, and Catholic Community Services. So again, the goal is just to help get people connected and go that last mile with them. So it's not just, here's your free computer or your free internet connection, good luck, but take them all the way. As far as our capital fund, there's 2 straightforward requests. One is our Sprague renovation, and we're requesting an additional $105,000 needed to accommodate some construction challenges that we encountered on the east entrance. So it's a building that was built in 1928. So you come up against some surprises there, and another $30,000 to fully furnish the renovated Sprague branch. So a total of $135,000 out of our fund balance. And our last item is for HVAC filtration, $125,000. And this is really for the safety of staff and patrons. We'd like to expedite the installation of some ionization filtration systems in our HVAC units across all of our 8 locations. And in addition to mitigating the spread of COVID-19, these systems will also kill mold, bacteria, other viruses, reducing allergens, odors, smoke particles, etc. So can I answer any questions for anyone on council?
Thank you, Peter. Sounds awesome. The program sounds great. I like where you're headed. Questions, concerns, comments, council members? Darren.
Thanks. These all sound like great things worthy of the budget amendment. My question is, how do we get better informed or involved in that master facilities planning process? And how do our constituents get better involved in that? And, what's the plan for engagement? Because I just haven't heard a lot about it. So I'm wondering, how can I learn more?
Yeah, actually, I think Councilman Mono, I saw an email. I don't know if it was from you or from Russell. Yeah, I'd love to set up a time and talk to council about what would work for you. I mean, we can do a presentation and work session. I'm also reaching out, as I do annually, to set up kind of one-on-one meetings with each of you to talk a little bit about what to expect with budget and do some just where we are with whatever planning initiatives we have. So I can certainly cover that one-on-one or in small groups, or if you'd prefer to have a more formal presentation in a work session. So I'll look for some feedback or guidance from you on that. And as for constituents, we did public engagement in the very beginning of the process, and this was last year, and we did a number of public engagement sessions. I think, though, that's worth revisiting and seeing if we can do some more. COVID kind of happened right in the middle here, and then the project lay fallow for a few months, and then we were regrouping to figure out how do we continue to do this in a digital manner. So yeah, we're certainly open to doing more community engagements, whether that's through virtual meetings, Facebook Lives. But we've been in the stage of the process now where we've been doing sessions with community leaders, nonprofits, faith-based social services, as well as elected officials, appointed officials, et cetera. Yeah, so there's nothing scheduled on the books at this point, but certainly we can schedule some more things both for council and for the public to be engaged.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll talk soon on that, I hope. Yeah. Other questions?
Any other questions? Great, I don't see any. To council staff, whoever's on board, do we need a straw poll? And there's not it says TBD for both the public comment and the council action. Do we need to put those on future agendas?
Madam Chair, you will set the date for the public hearing on February 16th.
Oh yeah, I missed that line in my agenda.
And set the date for February 16th, and the public hearing, I believe, will be for March 2nd.
Great, it's perfect. Thank you. I guess we could look for a straw poll just to give Peter and his team an idea of where everybody's sitting. So if anybody wants to give us a straw poll on this budget amendment for the library. Or not.
And you will have the public hearing.
Okay. We will be in touch. You'll see us again, Peter, in the future.
All righty. Well, thanks again for your time. And I also want to just thank Russell for he's always helpful in shepherding us through and figuring out, what steps to take. So thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Peter.
Take care.
All right, budget item number 6, a resolution. This is a follow-up with our HUD funding monies. So I think we've got Ben Lutke here. Is Ben here?
Yep, I'm here. I need to keep my video off. It has not been successful with a well-functioning WebEx for me today.
You got it. Okay, we've got Ben. And then I think we have Blake Thomas, our CAN director, and Lonnie the hand director, Jennifer Schumann, hand director, deputy director, Tony Milner, hand policy program manager. But I will turn it over to Ben, and then we can go from there. If that's all right with everyone. I see Lonnie has her puppy in her office.
Thanks, Madam Chair. This is the third briefing on the CARES Act HUD grants. The potential vote is scheduled next Tuesday, February 16th. At the last briefing on February 2nd, the council discussed potential uses for the unallocated funds. And I'm putting those amounts in the chat again, just so we all have the same numbers. The council expressed interest in food insecurity and facilitating equitable vaccine distribution as policy priorities for those unallocated funds. 468,900 CDBG and 460,828 ESG. The council requested additional information on residents that would be served for the different organizations that could receive the unallocated funds, target areas, if any, and potential funding splits between those organizations. HAND staff has been talking with the county health department, who issued an equitable distribution of vaccines request for applications, to see if some of those applications have focus areas on the west side of Salt Lake City that could use some of the city's remaining funds. My understanding is HAND is still waiting on some of those details from the applicants to the health department, as well as some details on the applicants that the city has been working with and how they could use the additional funds. So we have a partial update, but we're still expecting more information. The council can decide how to use these unallocated funds next month if more time is needed. We can also hope to get more information between today and next Tuesday when the vote is scheduled. I'm going to turn the time over to HAND staff. And we have a one-pager that was emailed to you yesterday evening with some of these updates, and we can screen share it as well.
And I don't know if the vice chair received the message, but it looks like we have a chair who does not have a functioning internet right now. So if the vice chair could momentarily step in while she's figuring that out, it's just one of those days. Thanks.
She's loading up. She's loading up. But yeah, if you wouldn't mind sharing the screen, Ben, that would be great.
Thanks, Bobby.
Thank you, Council Vice Chair. Is it all right if I step in a little bit now?
Yes, please, Lonnie.
Thank you to Ben. He's been very helpful in trying to get all of these details together since our last meeting with you just a week ago. I hope that you all are able to see this. It's kind of small for me on the screen. We have received information from our friends in Salt Lake City Sustainability. Actually, since this document was sent to Ben last evening, and we have a little bit more information as far as trying to define the number of individuals served as was requested during our conversation last meeting. So I would love to go through these. If you want to talk through the details of Nourish to Flourish, and Tony could speak to the direct conversations he and our team have had with each of the different applicants. You'll see at the bottom of the additional revised request that we have more ask now than we have monies. So we're back more into the typical realm with our HUD funding requests. and that's in the CDBG section. And if you wouldn't mind scrolling down, I'm not sure if it's Bobby that's running the screen. Under ESG, we are closer to the amount of unallocated funding with just about $5,000 difference based on the request from our folks at Soap to Hope and with Volunteers of America. I guess I would like to just provide that as an introduction. And then if there are specific questions that we can answer, or if you'd like us to go line by line, whichever the preference is, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Lonnie. Sorry, my computer froze and whatever. We're back-ish. I mean, I don't know that we need to go line by line. It's pretty self-explanatory for me, but I think I'll just open it up to council for comments and questions. And I do want to say thank you to the hand staff for getting this done so quickly. That was a lot of work in a week, so I appreciate that. But I will go ahead and open it up to council members for thoughts.
I have a question, Madam Chair.
Yeah.
On the Nourish to Flourish, they are proposing to serve 62,000 meals in 80116, 84161, 84104. How have they distributed? Like, how does that work? I know that they hire small businesses to provide the food, and then who gets the food? Like, how is it distributed? Do you know?
Tony, would you be able to speak more to that?
Yes. Good question. So it's my understanding that they basically don't take any administrative costs or any staffing costs. They basically are just the conduit between what they do. They said that for this, if they were to receive funding, they would actually partner with local Salt Lake City restaurants to then provide meals at distribution sites in connection with different nonprofit partnerships. Say, for example, we talk community action, neighborhood house, and so they would set up distribution sites, and they just kind of connect the small business restaurant to provide meals that are healthy, culturally sensitive, and then set up the distribution sites with the local nonprofits, who are then also able to kind of capture the required information that we need.
So let's say community action, they have clients, and then those clients will be receiving this food. All right, and then on the other one, on the I can't remember the name for the ESG, the one that says outreach. The SOAPy, I'm sorry, I don't have it with them.
Soap to Hope.
Yeah, so that one. How does that work? How is it different than other outreach programs?
So good question. So they're a newer service provider here in Salt Lake County. They are fairly new. They do have everything set up that we would need them to administer federal funding. We would actually be working with them really closely to kind of bring them up to the speed of data collection, data entry, to administer a federal grant. They kind of specialize, it's my understanding that they specialize with victims of sex trafficking, human trafficking, as well as those dealing with substance abuse issues. So that's kind of their, the population that they try to seek out and give services to.
And do they have a target? Like, do they have a number of people that they hope to help?
So they do have a very large target, and this is something that council staff Ben Ludke pointed out to us as well. And we can definitely follow up with council for additional, more detailed information. They give a very large number, around 5,200 to serve. But then again, to the way we wrote the applications, applicants could technically apply for programs that would go all the way back to March of 2020, all the way through September of 2022. ESG funds can also be used county-wide, which then kind of does, it's a larger population that they're going to be running into, a larger time frame. But then we would also work really closely with whoever receives funding to have really tight, measurable, accurate outcomes, outputs that are just kind of, and really just kind of, because this is their ask, but then we're just going to really try rein them in to make sure that it's good, accurate, and measurable for any type of funding received.
All right, thank you.
Council members, are there any concerns with just following this plan sort of as it is? We do have a potential vote on this on the 16th. That's next week, right?
Madam Chair,
Yes, sir.
2 questions for the council. The CDBG, there is a $40,000 difference between available funds and what would be requested. So one question for the council is, are you comfortable giving all of the CDBG funds to Nourish to Flourish? Or would you like to take $40,000 and make that available for the equitable distribution of vaccines? But those specific community partners were not identified unless that update is available today. So that's one question for the council. The other question is for ESG. There's almost $5,000 remaining that does not have recommended use. So wanted to highlight that just going with the administration's recommendation, I think there are still those 2 items for the council to consider.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. I saw that was there. I just want to get money out the door. So I will leave it to council members' discussion and open it up. I'd rather sort of have some of that discussion right now so we could be prepared to vote sooner rather than later. I know we have a little bit of time. I'll get to both Lonnie and Tony here in a second. A little bit of time before the deadlines, but I don't want to be right up against a deadline and panicking that we're not spending this money. So those are just my concerns. I will open it up to council members, but first, either Lonnie or Tony, whoever wants to go first. Your hands were up at the same time, so Rochambeau.
Tony.
I'm sure Lonnie maybe was going to say the exact same thing. We just wanted to point out that sustainability did get in an updated budget. It was a very complicated budget that they had to pull together because they have a couple of different partners: Comunidades Unidas, United Way, and International Rescue Committee. So they had to work really closely with them. So they did put forward an additional increase as well. And they're interesting too, is because then they're providing food boxes. They partner with local wholesalers that are here in town that have connections to refugee community startups. And they wholesale food boxes. So just kind of that separation between Nourish to Flourish's meals. The other one from sustainability would be food boxes. But we can provide that information to council, and we greatly apologize that we didn't have that sooner.
Like I said, you guys did a lot of work in a week to get this turned around as quick as you did, so that's okay. Council members? Dan?
Thank you very much. This is awesome. I'm glad we have this problem than trying to find out what to do with $900,000. This is nicer to have this problem. With the $40,000 over now, what's your recommendation? Nourish to Flourish and the other food distribution or the vaccine, if you had the choice?
I think that's our decision, Dan.
I know, but I'm just asking for the recommendation.
I thought that maybe Councilmember Dugan would ask this question this week. So we have not enough information, I think, to be able to say go ahead and recommend or feel comfortable with enough detail on the vaccination piece. There's a lot of missing or not as stringent request from the applicants that came through the Salt Lake County Health Department to line with the HUD restrictions and requirements. And the sustainability request actually puts us into a lot more request than you're seeing on the current sheet that Bobby has. So I feel like the vaccination part is probably third tier in the Nourish to Flourish or the sustainability foods food delivery, emergency food delivery. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and that's how I was leaning. I was just seeing if that was the same recommendation, because I'm looking at, hey, I love the Nourish to Flourish, but you know, if you, however, sustainability comes in, you know, you split it however it does to serve the most people, because I think that's very helpful. And if you could take the extra $5,000 you have from the EFG to throw it into that pot too, that'd be great, but I'm not sure you can do that. So I'm all for helping the restaurant and helping the underserved with meals. I really think that's great. And my understanding would be there's probably enough funding on the vaccination side to do what we need to do on the vaccines. But that's my position.
Great. Other council members?
So if there's a deficit on the CDBG ones of $40,000, like the way I understand it is like we need to come up with $40,000 now, or no?
Well, we just decide if we're gonna spend all $468,900 in one program, or split that $468,900 into potentially 3 programs.
Okay.
Because sustainability now has a proposal, a budget proposal idea for us that they just got, understandably. And, you know, I think from our discussion last time, Tony mentioned that you had reached out to these guys, and Nourish to Flourish had said, we'll take all the money.
Right.
They had the capacity to take all of the money, right? And so we had asked them to come back with a few more answers to some of our questions, like what would all of the money mean? And that was here. And then when they reached out to other people, they were like, oh, maybe $40,000 would work, right? And so these are just the proposals. And then I think we just need to decide how we want to split that $468,900. Knowing also that sustainability has a proposal as well. So, I mean, technically, if we had $1 million, it sounds to me like Nourish to Flourish would say, we'll take it all. But I think that there may be a way to balance that between the 3 programs if all 3 of those programs are what the priority of the council is for that money. I think that's the question that we're at right now.
And so how much did sustainability ask for again? Just $40,000?
No, the $40,000 comes from the community partners, the county health department community partners for equitable. I mean, the idea is equitable distribution of a vaccine.
Okay.
And then we didn't have the numbers yet for sustainability, but Tony, did you have those numbers?
Yes. So their total increase, they originally asked for 141,000, but then they've done an increase up to 392. But then they did also want to express too that they could even go higher. They do have the capacity as well. They want council to know that.
So what would be their additional? I don't do math. That's why I became a lawyer. Every lawyer says that everywhere, by the way.
So their additional request would be 251,000 on top of their original request.
So again, I don't think the numbers are that there's $468,900. Nourish to Flourish will take it all if we give it to them. There's a request from sustainability of 251,000 and a potential request from I think it's the county health department. Is that right, Tony? The county health department for 40,000. So again, in a problem that we've in almost four budget cycles I've been through, not one that we've generally had, is how would we like to split up the $468,900? Andrew.
I might have missed this somewhere in the middle, but do we have any details from sustainability about their food delivery concept? And how it may overlap with Nourish to Flourish or other Utah Food Bank, those kind of things?
So great question. So I asked that specifically. So thankfully, they're not competing against other food banks. They're not becoming another food bank and tapping into the state food bank system. This is completely new. And again, meal boxes versus Nourish to Flourish, which would be meals. Since we are going to be asking them to target the most hardest hit communities of Salt Lake City, we are going to make sure that they communicate with each other about distribution, sites, marketing, outreach as well.
Where are they getting their food from?
So they have, I forget, I want to say it's like New Roots. There's one organization called New Roots, and I believe there's another one. Apparently they both have connections to New American startups for food wholesale or food production. So they would partner directly with them for, again, healthy, culturally sensitive, culturally relevant food boxes, depending on the population that they're going to be serving.
We have confidence in this new concept and program. I know I'm putting you on the spot, Tony.
It's looking at their proposal. I can say it's a solid proposal.
Madam Chair, I think it's a good idea perhaps to hit multiple bases with this money. If we can hit multiple populations and types of food, it would make sense to me. So I would recommend carving out some of the money for the sustainability project, Nourish to Flourish, and we still need that 40,000 for the other community partners.
Okay, so my quick math is that if you take the 468, I forget, I have literally like 18,000 electronic devices in front of me and not a calculator, or not open one. So if you take the 468,900 and minus the 40,000, that leaves us with 428,900. To be quite honest, you could probably just split it in half and everybody gets a piece of the pie. Maybe not as much as they wanted, but it's more than.
Yep, I think it's.
Thanks, Ben. He did the math. And yes, I know there's a calculator on my phone. John Bike just texted me that.
Madam Chair, does the mayor have any thoughts at all?
I texted Aaron to see, and if Madam Mayor wants to chime in at all, I think
Sure.
that's up to you, Mayor.
I'll just add that I think we all share in the desire to assist in the vaccine distribution, but it seems that there's a sort of a premise unspoken that if there were more money going to the county, they'd be able to distribute it faster, but I don't believe that that's actually the limiting factor here. So there's a lot of need with the community organizations we're talking about, and I totally share in wanting to speed that process up, but money doesn't seem to be the lever controlling that.
So we could just split the 468,900 two ways and give it to the two programs that have asked for it in a way that is a proposal that seem to have really good ideas and ability to track, which I think one of the things that Tony mentioned with the county health department is that with these federal monies, we have to track everything pretty closely, and that there might be some with the county in tracking that program. Did I make that up, Tony, or did you actually say something like that?
If you made it up, you made it up very well. So yes, you actually captured that really well. Yes.
Okay, so with that, other discussions, Andrew?
I'm comfortable with that, Madam Chair. I think the one request would be, there are times when we may seem like we're self-serving by paying the city to do certain things versus community partners. I would request we just make sure we have clear information from sustainability about their process in using community partners for this food, so we can make sure it's clear to the community how this is working.
So what I'm hearing is to, and maybe I heard this wrong, to just split the 468,900 two ways into the two food insecurity programs. And if there's more money to help with vaccines later on, we can deal with it then. Does that seem right? I'm getting thumbs up. Great. And then the only other issue is there's $4,000 left over somewhere, but we might be able to spend that before the deadline comes, still take action on what we have budgeted and deal with $4,000 before the deadline. Yes, Andrew?
I'm certain one of the two organizations could use 5,000 somewhere to do something. I don't think that'd be a huge issue. I'm just guessing.
Yeah, I think so. Okay, great. Again, really want to thank Hand for your hard work, quick turnaround on all of this. So thank you. And I think we're good with this. We hopefully won't need a fourth briefing. Okay, our next item of business is, let me double check. Item number 7, an update on the windstorm budget. And I believe Lisa alluded to this in her updates a little earlier, but at the table, we've got Jennifer and Mary Beth. So I will turn it over to Jennifer.
Hi, I'll just give a quick update on why we're here in this kind of a little bit unusual procedurally, and then I'll turn it over to Mary Beth for the details. So it's slightly unusual because the council did act in a budget amendment earlier this fiscal year to approve a lump sum to address some of the needs that were obvious around the city for the windstorm and not wanting to delay some of those needed fixes. And at the time, the administration provided their best estimates as to how the money might be used, how that might be divvied up. Since that time, the administration has more final estimates and has honed in on sort of what's actually needed. So while there's not a need for the council to act in a budget amendment, because the total will still be in the same place in the budget and it will still be one lump sum, to sort of be consistent with sort of best practices and transparency, the administration thought it would be helpful to come back to the council and explain how those things changed and make sure that the council was okay with those changes. So I will turn it over to Mary Beth for those details. Uh-oh, Mary Beth's muted. Let's see.
How about now? Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Too many buttons, too many things to push. Thanks, Jennifer, for that. You did a fantastic job. So on budget amendment number 3, that's when we requested the funding for the windstorm. We requested $5,925,000. In the write-up, we broke out several different areas of what we were estimating that we needed for funding. Since that time, we have found 2 additional needs. One of them being sprinkler repairs from trees that in the right-of-way that they're city trees and they've damaged residents' sprinkler systems. So that would be one of the areas. And then the other one, I think Lisa alluded to earlier on, which was the cemetery and removing of the and reinstalling the monuments, sod replacement, headstones, curb and gutter, and sprinkler repair for that as well. Like Jennifer stated, we didn't have to come back to the council, but because we had line itemed it in the descriptions inside the written documentation, we felt necessary for us to update you with this information.
That was nice of you. Thank you, Mary Beth. Council members, any questions? Great.
Can we have a straw poll?
We sure can.
Thank you.
So anybody want to offer a straw poll to approve the moving around of the already appropriated money to fix the things that need to be fixed?
Madam Chair, I propose a straw poll to do exactly that.
Great. All those in favor? Thumbs up. Oh, James. All right, that passes unanimously. Thank you. Thanks for taking care of all of that.
Thank you, Council.
You're welcome. Good to see you. All right, we have a couple of things left. We're almost there. Report from Chair and Vice Chair. I just want to echo something that Anna said in the RDA meeting. I know that this last week or so has been very difficult for our city family. Over almost 4 years of working with the city, it really does become a family. And I want to send my condolences to our building services department, everybody that had the opportunity to work with Gregory, and send our condolences to his family. I keep reading all of the amazing, I didn't have a chance to work a ton with him, but I keep reading all of the amazing stories about him. And I know that he was a dear friend to many people in our city. We're very sorry for this loss. And it's been a rough year, and this just keeps going sometimes, but our condolences to our city family and to Gregory's family. Mr. Rogers, do you have anything as a report from Vice Chair?
I don't, Madam Chair.
Great. I can't remember if we have some announcements from our executive director, Cindy Gus Jensen.
Yep, just one. And that is the council members, some of you at least, have received a request from an organization. They would like to see the city adopt a resolution recognizing and expressing support for COVID-19 victims and survivors. And they would encourage you to adopt a resolution recognizing March 1st as COVID Memorial Day. This came with a fairly short turnaround time because you don't have a meeting very close to March 1st. So we need to turn it around for the 16th if the council is interested in doing this, if you'd like to schedule it. And if you decide you would like to, what we would do is get a draft out to you in the next few days so that we can get that on your agenda, and of course coordinate with the mayor's office to confirm that the mayor would like to join.
Can I get a quick thumbs up or thumbs down if you want to do this so that we can get some direction to staff, because it is such a quick turnaround? We've got 1, 2, 3. Yes, Chris?
I'm a thumbs up. I'm just wondering why, like, is this part of a national thing, or like, why is March 1st the day?
I don't know. That's what their request is. We could certainly ask them that. The email is from the Smart City Policy Group. So we can sure find out more about it.
Sorry, Cindy, how about we do this? Instead of a straw poll, can I ask council members to look at the email talk with staff about questions, and by the end of the week, or even sooner if you can, as soon as you can, within the next couple of days, let staff know if you're interested or not interested. We'll tally up and go from there.
I mean, I don't have any, I don't have any problem whether
Right.
it's, I just was wondering.
Yeah.
So I'm a yes.
Andrew?
Have we all gotten the email?
We'll double check, and in fact, we can just send it out to everyone so that it's bumped up higher. And it doesn't have a lot of information, so I don't think it has a draft of a resolution. We would need to get that from the organization, and we'll go ahead and proceed and tell them that you haven't made a decision, but that we need, to prepare just in case. So we'll get that, and then we'll get a draft out to you as soon as possible before a commitment, is implied.
Yeah, I think that's good. Thank you. All right. We are at item number 10. We do have a closed session tonight. It is for the purpose of discussing collective bargaining. So I would look for a motion to enter closed session. You may have received another link, or there may be, I don't know if you did or not, but just stay here. In this meeting, we will ask people to leave that do not need to be in the closed session, and then we will lock this closed session. So I need a motion to enter into closed session for purposes of discussing collective bargaining.
Madam Chair, oh, sorry.
Well, no, mine was just a follow-up question. Will we be coming back just so that if anyone's following along, they know that we're not, correct?
Yes, thank you, James. I appreciate that. No, we will be adjourning our meeting after the closed session. So this is the end of our open meeting session. Will be ending after our closed session.
Madam Chair, I move that we go into our closed session for the purpose of discussing collective bargaining.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilmember Wharton and a second by Councilmember Dugan. I'll go ahead and roll call this. Councilmember Wharton?
Yes.
Councilmember Valdemoros?
Yes.
Councilmember Rogers?
Yes.
Councilmember Dugan?
Yes.
Councilmember Mano?
Yes.
Councilmember Johnston?
Yes.
And I'm a yes, so we will be in closed session. Thank you to everybody watching our today's work session. That's the end of our work session. Thanks.